Well, obviously, 50 years statehood and seeing where Alaska is today and where it started. My parents came up when it was a territory in 1957. A lot has changed. I remember as I was making those words and reading the speech, I was reminded at the time living off of Boniface Parkway when it was a dirt road. So things have changed a great deal in Alaska, but it's a great time to celebrate our last 50 years and what we see in the future to the next 50. I think there's no question, the reason the United States can be called an Arctic nation is because of Alaska. And as you look and see all the news accounts, no matter where you talk about the issues of climate change, global warming, Alaska is ground zero. And the Arctic is really ground zero. You see the impacts of global warming more than anywhere else. And it came very apparent to me during the election, as well as now serving, that it's important that we bring these issues to the forefront and get a strong focus on what our country can do to make sure our Arctic nation is well protected in how to deal with climate change and global warming into the future. Well, the next step is we have 7 bills. They'll start a committee process, which in the United States Senate can be somewhat cumbersome, but the reality is it starts to create the awareness of the different issues, from the research issues we want to bring up to the revenue sharing of our offshore continental development to the issues of how we figure out how to deal with villages that are falling off into the ocean. So it's a variety of pieces of legislation. They'll go to several different committees. And then we'll also look toward the climate change bill and see if there's an opportunity to weave some of this policy into that bill and therefore accomplish the same goal of this legislation. Well, I think the wake-up call was not only that the Arctic ice is melting, but when you saw Russia plant a flag at the bottom of the sea there, suddenly it woke people up that the dynamics of what's going on in the Arctic has changed dramatically. And it's in our best interest as a country to be at the table with the rest of the countries that surround the Arctic and making sure we have an equal voice in determining the long-term policy on oil and gas development, mineral development, on the issues of our fisheries, the whole transportation, tourism, all the activity that goes on there. It's changed dramatically. That flag being planted by the Russians, I think, woke people up that it is time for us to be part of this treaty so we have an equal footing to ensure that our interests are protected. Well, I think anytime you talk about outer continental shelf development with oil and gas, it's always tricky because you have a balance between the environment and making sure it's a good, solid development to what's needed, and that's making sure we have oil and gas for our independence as a country and our national security. I think Alaska knows how to do it. I think we have a great record that we can show how to do development offshore, how we have introduced new technologies like directional drilling that can go out 8 miles out into the ocean. So we have a lot of new technologies in advancement that I think we can show how to do OCS development the right way. Where I'm surprised every day how few people in Congress understand the new technologies we've been implementing. So I think the time has changed, and also having a Democrat in the majority talking about this, I think, is a huge benefit for Alaska. Well, anytime you talk about legislation or ideas like that where you have a desk, an operation within the National Health Services talking about Arctic policy and Arctic health is something different, something unique, but it was asked for in 1984. And I think a lot of it was people saw the Arctic as not really important enough. But because the Arctic has become such a national issue and a worldwide issue, I think people see this now as a potential. We think it's a great idea. There's a lot of health issues. And what a better time to be talking about Arctic health issues as we debate the great health care for this country, that we also don't forget the unique health issues of our Arctic. So I think the potential is much better now than ever before because we have the major issue, the national issue of health care, but also because the Arctic and the emphasis and focus that people are now having on the Arctic.